welcome back to another edition of the Fantasy Football Joker. I am your host, Jack Lusney. As always, make sure you follow me at Jack Lusney on Twitter and on YouTube, and make sure also that you are checking out at FF Advice Forum. That's fantasyfootballadviceforum.com. You want to make sure that you're jumping in there. It's got a great community starting out. You can join fantasy leagues. You can post your own league so that other people can join. There's all kinds of trade analyzers. There's questions. There's all kinds of great content going up, such as my show, articles, posts, all kinds of stuff. And it's only $2.99 a month. So make sure that you check that out. As you can tell by my voice, I'm clearly still recovering a little bit from my trip to the United States of America, and I ended up getting heat stroke, so I got pretty sick for a while there. But, I had to come through anyways, even though I'm losing my voice a little bit. Should be okay here. So let's get right into it and talk about the two big releases that have just happened in the NFL world. So obviously, DeAndre Hopkins was part of our short player profile series because that news happened to drop right at the time that we were doing D, and if it hadn't, then we could have just as easily done Dalvin Cook, who was just recently released by the Minnesota Vikings, likely to be officialized today. So obviously the big landing spots that everyone is projecting would be Miami, and I think people have talked about Dallas. Buffalo is another one, and I think that would be the most interesting because I don't think there's ever been a situation where you had two brothers sharing a backfield. That would definitely diminish Damian Harris's value, but I think that would be the most ideal landing spot for Dalvin Cook. It would also be, in my opinion, the most fun landing spot for Dalvin Cook. And as I had mentioned in the short player profile for DeAndre Hopkins, I really think, honestly, his best option would be to return to Cleveland because of the connection with Deshaun Watson. I don't think that the issues that arose in Houston ever really had anything to do with Deshaun Watson. From everything that I looked into, it seems like their relationship was always good and ended on good terms, and so I don't see any reason that they wouldn't be able to continue and mutually benefit each other. So if I could just wave my magic wand, I would put DeAndre Hopkins in Cleveland, and I would put Dalvin Cook in Buffalo with his brother. Say hello to my new co-host behind me, Rocky, who is our new puppy. She's a husky pom mix, and she is definitely a handful. What are you looking at? So for today, I just wanted to talk about something more generalized. So I wanted to talk about trades, because I think trades is one of the most fun aspects of fantasy football. And it's one of those things that a lot of times I hear, oh, well, this league doesn't trade, and what do I do? And so I just wanted to give some of the strategies that I use. And so I think the first thing that I would say is you need to just be prepared for rejection. For every dozen trade offers I send out, I don't even get a response half the time, I would say. And when I say half the time, I really mean 90% of the time. That I don't even get a response from the person. It just hangs there until I inevitably just cancel the trade. And so the first thing I would definitely say is you just need to stay consistent and not be afraid of the rejection, and know that you're going to have to put in work to get this trade through. And the second thing that I would say is you need to be steadfast in your player evaluation, but not to the degree where you're going to lose out on a trade. And so I tend to be a little bit more loose with it, but just to kind of give an example, I always say the winner of the trade is the person who got the best player in the trade. And there's lots of ways to do it. There's 3 for 1, 3 for 2. There's all kinds of different ways. But a lot of times you really kind of got to hang nuts a little bit. You got to be able to put yourself in a position where people say, oh, you lost that trade. And if you really believe in yourself, so I'll give you an example. And I know it's not a perfect, no, there is no such thing as a perfect example in fantasy football, but I had traded for Travis Kelce, and I had traded Calvin Ridley and a first round pick for Travis Kelce. And at the time, because that was a few years ago, that was seen as an overpay. Except Travis Kelce has dominated as the tight end one of all of fantasy football, and Calvin Ridley was out of the game for 2 years, and so I got lucky with that. That's why I say it's not exactly a perfect example, but it's just to say sometimes you have to just go get your guy. So don't be afraid to overpay sometimes on a trade. Even recently, I traded a first round pick to get George Kittle, and then I turned around and traded George Kittle to get DeAndre Swift because I personally am a believer in that if DeAndre Swift pops for that team, he's going to be a top 10 running back. And so I was willing to go ahead and pay up for him. A few other trade strategies that I wanted to talk about. So one of my personal favorites is the throw-in. And when you do this properly, it's more for really deep dynasty leagues, especially. So, for example, I'm in a 16-team league. And so when you're working a trade in a league like that, every player that you can get, no matter how seemingly inconsequential, generally can turn into something if you carefully manage your resources. So, one of the things that I like to do is get a throw in on a trade. So, if I'm trading for a superstar, a lot of times I'll ask for a seemingly innocuous piece. So, one time it was Latavius Murray, who ended up having some value in very deep leagues, obviously. And then occasionally you can turn that into a pick. So another time it was Odell Beckham, and I turned him into a pick, and that pick turned into Romeo Doubs, and Romeo Doubs later became part of another deal. And you move those pieces around and you move up, and you're eventually able to acquire more elite players than you would have otherwise had you just stayed put. Pursuant to the same type of strategy as a throw-in, I will often also, because people are wise to the 2 for 1s and the 3 for 1s, I will still send what is basically a 2 for 1 or 3 for 1, but I'll just look at that person's roster and I will make those other pieces essentially the worst pieces on their roster. So if they've just got like a bench wide receiver and or running back or two that honestly shouldn't even be rostered, I'll just throw them into the deal. Because again, by my theory, I'm just trying to acquire the best player. So I will have that superstar player that I really want and then 2 complete scrubs. But then mentally, where they would otherwise be, doing like a 3-for-1, where it seems like they're just getting a bunch of junk for a superstar. Now they are sending, yeah, the superstar, but oh, I'm also getting rid of these two awful players off my team that they're going to eat that. But ultimately, you can just drop those players and then look on waivers or whatever thin waivers might be available, or just hold them, whatever. But ultimately, you've gotten the best player out of the deal. And a lot of times I'll either drop them or, again, throw ins. I'll trade them for late fourth round picks and I'll try and turn those into. If I can turn a third or fourth rounder into even just a mediocre player with some upside, generally speaking, I can then maybe spin that as part of a deal to get, a more established veteran or even move up to like a second round pick, that you gotta be able to shine those turd nuggets when you find them and spin them into gold. Now there are two faux pas of trading that I want to talk about. The first one, I think, that really gets my goat is when a person is, it's the used car salesman version of trading, where they are really trying to give you just terrible players, bench players that otherwise would never make their starting lineup. And they're like, oh, yeah, just, let me have your best wide receiver. Like, those are honestly the hardest to deal with, and I get it. Every league has one of those. So the first thing I would say is don't be that person. That's definitely, you don't want to be that person. And the second thing I would say is that trading is not supposed to be completely risk adverse. So if you're going into every single trade with, I can never take a risk here, like, I'm not saying that you should just go willy nilly and have zero risk assessment and trade, Jonathan Taylor for Miles Sanders straight up just because you love the Panthers. Like, things like that don't make sense. I get it. But at the end of the day, don't try and offer me, Damian Harris and Alan Lazard and your second round pick for Jonathan Taylor. Like, it's just things like that are not going to fly. And that's the kind of stuff that really gets, that gets on people's radar as a bad trader. And I think the other thing is the misnomer of it's it's two things. It's trading just to trade. This, I get it that trading is fun, but every trade that you make ultimately should have some purpose for your team. And so if you're just making a trade to make a trade, odds are it probably is not the best thing for your team. And also to that same point, drafting to trade. So if you just were like, I'm going to hit running backs for the first 5 rounds and not set myself up for success by grabbing any other skilled positions, and I'm going to force other people to trade with me, well, that can always backfire because player value in the NFL is basically day to day. It's like the stock market. You might be up one day and you could be down tomorrow. Look at Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook's stock, uh, as recently as a year ago, he was considered a first round running back, and his stock has plummeted. Alexander Madison overnight is being drafted as a starting running back. So it's one of those things that you have to be willing to gamble on your guys. That's what fantasy football really is. And so, you have to also be willing to take a risk and, trade guys that are very good, but if you can foresee a situation, so for example, for me this year, that would be Josh Jacobs. I love Josh Jacobs. I think he's a great player, but I also don't like the way that the Raiders have set themselves up. And so I traded my share of Josh Jacobs ultimately so that I could pivot my team to being essentially a zero running back team, even though I retained Derrick Henry still. I basically have set myself up to where I have Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Justin Jefferson, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So to me, that's a wide receiver laden team where my my spike weeks should be enough to carry me through, and hopefully I get the biggest spike week of all in the championship week. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about today, so I've finally taken the plunge and I've joined Underdog and I've been doing a lot of best ball drafts. And I just wanted to talk about some of my player exposures and some of the strategies that I've been using. And so the biggest value that I see on the app right now, 100%, and even in the draft that I told myself I'm not going to take this player, I ended up taking Mark Andrews. And that's because just the value of Mark Andrews right now is absolute insanity. And I'm seeing that, that would be ultimately, if that holds through to redraft, essentially, redraft season, Mark Andrews might end up being my most drafted player across the board because first of all, I'm the type of person who I really like the tight end premium. I want to not have to just be worrying about trying to stream my tight end or find that late value tight end. Like, I want to be the Travis Kelce owner, generally speaking. But Travis Kelce is finally like getting the respect he deserves, to the point where his ADP is such that, except in the dynasty league where I already have him, I probably won't have many shares of him in redraft. Um, Even in my recent 10-man startup dynasty, he went much earlier than I was expecting, and so I was not able to get my usual Kelsey Mahomes stack. But Mark Andrews has the ability to match Travis Kelsey's production. We've seen that before in 2021. And even though last year he was obviously hampered with injuries, and we also saw that Lamar was also struggling with injuries, I think that Mark Andrews is clearly, he's going to be fighting for that tight end one this year, basically, with Travis Kelce, barring injuries again. But I just think that I think the Ravens are going to be looking to, avenge some of the narratives that are out there this year, and so I'm really counting on the Ravens to have a big season. Lamar and Mandrews especially, and getting him, I've basically gotten him in the third round of every single one of these best ball drafts that I've done, and so it's just one of those things where I just can't resist, and then I also have been taking the quarterbacks pretty early. That's another thing that I find, me personally, I like to have the stud quarterback. There's only one team so far that I did the draft for, and I ended up waiting on quarterback. So even in this one, I ended up with Justin Herbert in the fifth, which is another insane value. I think Justin Herbert is a smash pick this year. He's a lock to me with Kellen Moore for 5,000 yards and 35 touchdowns at least. So I think Herbert is a smash play. This one I went very running back heavy. I was able to get Christian McCaffrey, Nick Chubb. Alvin Kamara is another one in these best ball drafts. I've just been taking a ton of shares of him, especially as my third running back, because when Alvin Kamara plays, ultimately he is a superstar, and if he has one of those Christmas Day 6 touchdown type games, I want access to that. But also, he's going very late because of the potential suspension looming and the weird allegations and ongoings that are still in play for him. Now, if he ends up not being available to me, okay, it's not the end of the world, because I've taken him as my third running back in a lot of places, and I took shots on other running backs, especially Devon A. Shane, who I'm very, very big on. Tyreek Hill as a running back is even if Dalvin Cook were to sign there, I would still be drafting a Shane in all the places that I can get him late. And then for wide receivers, let's just see here who was. So the one team that I did not get the quarterback early ended up taking a triple stack of Dak Prescott, Geno Smith, and Aaron Rodgers. And in that one, I actually went A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin, Jackson Smith and Jigba, K.J. Osborne, Jalen Hyatt, Hunter Renfrow, and Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool is someone I have been drafting in most of my drafts. Even though he really did nothing last year, I think that he does have the opportunity, at least with the Bears, to develop into an outside receiver. And if he has like a multi-touchdown game or he pops off, he's kind of the kind of guy you can just draft like in the last couple rounds there, where you're just kind of taking flyers on guys anyways. And if they were to crack your lineup at any point, but he's the kind of big play type of receiver, and I do find myself taking him late in drafts. I also have a soft spot for John Mechie. I just think he kind of got shafted out of his rookie season due to illness, and he is now back 100%, and he's working, with a rookie quarterback, but Houston's essentially done a reset of that franchise. And so I'm excited to see what Mechie can do. And he's going so late that it's worth just taking a shot just to kind of see. I do find myself taking a lot of Drake London. I'm definitely rising on Treylon Burks. I've been taking a lot of George Pickens and Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson especially is due for touchdown regression. He had no touchdowns last year, none. And you have to assume that obviously that Kenny Pickett is gonna make a leap forward. I don't think it's a massive leap that he has to make. If he can throw 20 to 25 touchdowns, that's already a dozen more than he had last year. And so when you distribute those among the team, you can say maybe 4 more for Pickens, which would be a really nice year for him. And then maybe 4 to 6 for Deontay Johnson. That would, with his if he maintains his normal volume, which he did last year, he just really had no touchdowns. If you add those 4 to 6 touchdowns, his season looks a lot different. And then I think the rest spread among Freiermuth and whoever else. Probably Najee Harris, who's also someone that I've taken a lot of shares of. So those are just my quick thoughts. These are definitely my first times doing best ball. So I'm learning as I go, but I think that's just one of the fun things about fantasy football, and one of the ways that you can learn the most is just exposing yourself to all kinds of different leagues. For example, I'm in a vampire league. It's going to be my first time doing one of these types of leagues. Normally, I'm not that into it because, again, I'm more of a traditionalist. I like to have my traditional league where I'm able to trade and do that kind of stuff. But, I'm this year. I said I was gonna go hard. And I'm going to be doing fantasy sports not just in football, but also across hockey and basketball. So it's definitely going to be a trip for me this year. All right, so we'll keep it short. We'll keep it sweet. I'll leave you here. I'll be back with you tomorrow. I will be guest appearing on with the Fantasy Football Mad Scientist at FF Mad Scientist, talking about some rookie tight ends, breaking that down. I'll also be coming back with the short player profiles as soon as my voice has kind of recovered a little bit and the sickness finally leaves my body. And I will also be coming at you with more articles, more content, always on fantasyfootballadviceforum.com. Make sure you check that out. It is only $2.99 a month to join that awesome little community that is growing every day. Thank you so much for joining, and you guys all stay weird and have a wonderful weekend and an even better week.